Welcome back to the North Tonawanda Hall of Fame YouTube channel. It's another edition of one of our former player profiles. Today, we have the honor of having a great Bishop Gibbons star, class of 1971, the last class at Bishop Gibbons, quarterback extraordinaire, the great Tony Sukiennik. Tony, glad you could join us today from your home in New Hampshire, wherever that might be. And I'm sure you're going to tell us, but it's wicked cool to have you today with us.
Yeah, well, it was snowing a little bit this morning, but now it's raining and spring is coming. Spring is coming, and a new spring in our life is coming too. It's when I watched your last couple of episodes, Ed, I was very impressed with this, and I've been using Zoom for work for a couple of years, so it's a good way to communicate, but it's very effective. But there's no substitute for actually getting together, and I look forward to normal times in the near future where we can actually connect and have a drink together back in the old homeland.
Well, the last time we saw each other really in person was the 2016 North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame. And before that, you were gracious when my family came out to California for a wedding, and you took us around San Francisco. So we'll always be grateful for that as well too. And the first memorable encounter in San Francisco with Tony Sukiennik. And you got to admit, we did have some fun back then.
For sure. Well, anyways, I'm very impressed with the program here that you're putting together. So let me just say this is a theme throughout of our conversation today is going to be competition. You know, sports is about competition and life is about competition, no matter what anybody wants to say. So one of the things you have in life is you want to keep up with your kids, right? So I have a daughter who, I don't know, about maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, was interviewed on the CBS morning show by Charlie Rose and Nora O'Donnell. And, so she was very proud of that. And I was very proud of her, but I felt a little jealous. But now that I'm getting to do this, I'll throw this one in her face because I'll have her watch this interview and see who was more prominent, those interviewers or you.
But getting to your daughter, she's a tightrope walker.
Yes, that's what this was about. They had a segment on that morning show about her. But anyways, Ed, I'm proud to be interviewed by you. That was my point.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It still doesn't get you many points, but that's okay. You grew up in North Tonawanda and turned out to be one of the greatest athletes that came out of North Tonawanda. Tell us about your early experiences with sports, growing up in North Tonawanda, and when you had a good idea that you could really go forward and even into a collegiate career with it.
Well, that's a good question because I really wasn't born to be into sports. Now, my folks were really, really great people, but they had no sports background. I learned ingenuity from them, how to solve problems, that nothing should get in your way. So all those were traits that come in useful in sports. But I didn't know anything about sports. So I ended up going out in the neighborhood. And the first time I touched a ball glove, all the other kids knew how to play catch. So somebody put a glove on my hand and threw me a ball. And to my amazement, I caught the ball. But then I threw the ball with the glove. So that's how I started off in sports. I didn't grow up, maybe I was like 6, 7 years old at that point in time. So I got a late start. So we had a great neighborhood, and there was a guy in the neighborhood who was a great athlete too at Gibbons 4 years ahead of me, and his name was Joe Breloff. And I remember having an older guy in the neighborhood like that. He basically didn't laugh at me for throwing the ball with the glove. He just told me how to do it. And so that's the type of thing that you get. So it all started off in the neighborhood. Now, growing up in North Tonawanda, Ed, you know that, I don't know what it's like now, I don't know if it's as extreme, but everybody's lawns had to be perfect. And my father was one of those guys. Not only the front lawn had to be perfect, but the back lawn had to be perfect. So my back door neighbor was a guy named Paul Lipinoga, Keith Miranto's brother-in-law, right? So fortunately, his father was not one of those guys who cared about his lawn. So we just tore up that Lipinoga backyard, spring, summer, and fall, made it a mud pit, and we were just out there constantly playing. And I noticed that this is a theme that I got from Ron Pazik's interview and Rick Casada's interview. And I knew I was going to bring it up, but it's a consistent theme for almost anybody who's passionate about sports. You start off with your friends. And that was a very, very formative experience. We weren't playing organized ball. We were just going out in the backyard and playing and beating each other up. Okay. So I just got a hip replacement a month ago. It's my second one. I got a knee replaced, but Lipinoga basically, he got a hip replacement maybe 15 years ago, and he was blaming it on me for all those backyard incidents. Okay. So that's how we grew up. Right. So,
You said not any organized sports. At what point did you get into organized sports? Was it Little League? Was it Little League football or?
Yeah. Okay. So I went to a Catholic school. I think you went to this school for a short period of time, OLC school in North Tonawanda. And the Catholic schools, we didn't have gym class. At lunchtime, we ate our lunch real quick and we went out in the parking lot and played football and handball and all sorts of stuff in the parking lot. And that was our first taste of organized sports. But we did play baseball at OLC against other schools, and 6th, 7th, and 8th graders could play. And I played when I was in 6th grade, and Jerry Whitehead was on that team. And I got to play as a 6th grader, and we were playing on the big 90-foot field. So I had played Little League from the time I was like 9 years old, but I wanted to blow off my 12-year-old in Little League because I was already playing on the big field and I didn't want to go back to the little one. So one of the themes here, I think that comes out of this organized sports is, yeah, you do play the organized sports, but you still fall back and you're playing a lot of sandlot stuff with your friends. And I was always fortunate, as Casada said, that I had older guys and they were kind enough to let the little guy play with them. Because the only way you really excel as an athlete is if you really want to play up. It doesn't do you any good to be the king among younger people and even people your age. If you really want to be good, you play up. And so we were fortunate to have a culture where if you could play, having 8 guys on a team or 6 guys on a team rather than 3 guys on a team, they let the young kids play. And if you could play, they let you play and they included you. And that is really the biggest background. Now, just to follow up this, football, I started late, playing a lot of sandlot football and everything. But I went out for a Little League football team in North Tonawanda. There was 2 of them. One of them was called the Tigers. They were the cool team. And the other one was called the 49ers. And they were the other side of the tracks. And when I was 12 years old, Lipinoga told me, hey, why don't you go out for football? You're good. So I went out for football and all that. And I played football for years in the sandlot, but I quit. And you know why I quit? Because I didn't like them making me run until I was tired. Okay. I quit when I was 12 years old. I guess I didn't want it enough, or I didn't know how important it was to me. So the next year I'm 13 and now I got to lose 7 pounds as a slim 13-year-old in order to make the weight. Okay. I wish I could lose 7 pounds now when I got 30 that I could lose. All right. But I had to lose 7 pounds in order to play. So I played 1 year of Little League football on the 49ers and did really well. I was a halfback and a defensive end and wreaked havoc on defense and scored a lot of touchdowns there. And I says, man, I'm going to high school now. Okay. I'm going to be a big star. Right. And so now that's the next step. Now I go to Bishop Gibbons. Now I had grown up watching NT football. All right. And all those guys like John Chisera and Greg Zayats and Fred Wiechek and all those guys, those guys are my heroes. And as Pazik said, you were out there on the field asking for their chin straps. And it was really something seeing that red, white, and blue, that dark blue pants walk onto that field. All I wanted to do was play for that team. But I didn't have any say in it. At that point, your parents are saying, you're going to this high school, I'm going to that high school. And that was that, right? So that started off a little bit strange, okay? Because you're a freshman and you got no business playing on the varsity or anything. I never thought of that. Okay, so you're playing on the junior varsity. And the coaches of the junior varsity were kind of aligned with folks that they knew from the Tigers football team. And I was from the other side of the tracks. So I thought I was going to be a big star running back or quarterback or something. And they threw me at tackle. So I played my freshman year at Bishop Gibbons as an outside tackle in an unbalanced line. All right. But I also played like a gap middle linebacker and just wreaked havoc on defense. Right. So that's how I started. Now, there's a big life lesson in this, though, because sports, if it teaches you one thing, it's that hard work pays off. Right. All right. However, all of us know when you get out in the working world and the business world and the world in general, hard work doesn't always pay off. And so sometimes you have to deal with those sort of things. You know, even though you could have played this position, they're going to put you over there and you have to deal with it and you have to persevere through it. And what it got in me is it gave me more of a burning desire, you know, to excel. Right. So in a way, I thank them because I thought, and I probably had a big head and all that, because I still do. And I thought I was just going to go in and be a big star and everything was going to be easy. But sometimes you just got to pay your dues. So that's how I started off as Gibbons as a freshman. So then you can.
After your freshman year, you moved up to varsity or got the opportunity to play for varsity. You got to play for Chuck Ramsay.
That's correct.
Previous conversations that we had, you were a linebacker on defense.
Yes. Yeah.
And you did a pretty good job of doing that, you know, playing against, you know, other sophomores, juniors, and seniors in that football league, and it was quite good football. Was it Chuck Ramsay that helped you get that transition to get you off the line and move you over to linebacker, or what did he recognize? What did he recognize in you that, you know, precipitated a change?
Well, it wasn't really a change. I played that same position as a freshman on defense. Okay, so I really caused a lot of havoc as a linebacker as a freshman on defense also. So, but the real story here is pretty interesting. Is I wanted to go up to the varsity because I just wanted to play up, as I said before, right? So I wasn't worried about running the ball or being the quarterback or anything. You know, Jerry was a great quarterback, and you know I wasn't going to replace him. But I went up and I was really a good kicker. And I thought I can go up in the varsity and I'll just be the kicker. And that was my only goal, was to go up to the varsity and just be the kicker. I'll get my letter that way and all, right? So anyway, so I go out for the varsity and I could kick the hell out of the ball, right? So it turns out, you know, we're having you know, scrimmages and stuff like that. And I get to play my middle linebacker sort of position on defense. And I'm just wreaking havoc. Now it turns out Chuck Ramsay was the coach, and Dick Winters was his assistant, and I'll get to Dick in a little while. But Chuck also had John Wactawski, a legend at North Tonawanda, until Aaron Davis broke his scoring record in like 2009 or something like that. John Wactawski was the all-time leading point scorer in football. And John was just a prince of a guy, and it's so sad that we lost him so young. But John would come to all the scrimmages and everything, and John had a good eye, or he was a football savvy guy, okay? So I didn't talk to him or anything like that, but he was watching those scrimmages and he was consulting with Chuck afterwards, right? So he's watching these scrimmages. It turns out the last scrimmage of the year, I'm kicking an extra point. They go offsides. We try to kick it anyway, and they crash down into my leg, and I sprained my knee. And now I'm in a cast for like 10 days, okay, just before the season starts. So I missed the first game. I get the cast sawn off. I can't even bend my leg. 5 days later, I want to play, you know, kind of limping around. And Chuck brings me out, say, well, okay, we'll see if you can play. Sismar, you know, practice some kickoffs. And he sent me back to field the kickoffs, right? So I'm back there, maybe limping a little bit and fielding the kickoffs. But we're like 40, 45 yards away. And I'm throwing the ball back to Sismar to kick the next one. And I'm throwing it on a dead line. Okay. It wasn't arcing, I'm throwing the, thing 45 yards on a line. And I could see that this is when I was discovered. I saw Chuck and Sismar look at each other and go, what the hell is that? Right. So Chuck knew at that point in time that I was the next quarterback. Right. So anyways, we're in the third game of the year, and I'm still on the sidelines, and Gibbons is getting their ass kicked by Leroy, a town near Rochester. Right. And it's the third quarter, and I'm just on the bench still after being hurt and all that sort of stuff. And John Wactawski walks over to me. Right. He doesn't know me from nothing except he's seen me during preseason. And Johnny walks over to me and he says, Sukennik. He says, you go over and tell Chuck you're ready to play. So
How did that go over?
I went over and Chuck put me in. I played a little bit that game, but from the rest of the games that season, I was playing linebacker for the rest of the year because I did stuff in there. So it was kind of a funny story. So that Chisera mentions Johnny Wactawski and he mentions Chuck Ramsay. And Chuck, I can't say, enough about Chuck. This is just a small, anecdote over here. But Chuck, had an eye. He saw I could throw the ball and he knew that there's my future, quarterback, probably. And Johnny Wactawski was just kind of like an observer on the sidelines and all that. And he saw, put the kid in there, damn it. So I really thank everybody, whoever coached me or guided me for not only taking the time to notice maybe that there was some talent there, but giving you a chance and trusting you with it. Because Chuck had to trust me as a sophomore, putting me in there, so.
At what point did you take over the starting quarterback position for Gibbons?
Yeah, when I, my junior and senior years. So Jerry was a senior when I was a sophomore, and he was a quarterback.
Okay.
And I played fullback a little bit as a sophomore there, and had some spot duty, and I got to run the ball some, and had some, decent, success. Maybe 6 to 10 carries the whole year. And but yeah, so then we went to like an option offense because I knew I could run the ball, and so we went to an option offense from the start of our junior year. It was changed, and so I was the quarterback my junior and senior years there. And,
that was going to bring me my next point. Did Chuck Ramsay adapt to your style, or did you adapt to his offensive scheme?
Well, we went to option because he knew I could run the ball and he knew I could pass it. Okay, so he didn't want to waste me as a runner. And at that time, this was 1969. You can remember those great Oklahoma teams back then.
Right.
Oklahoma was running the wishbone option, right, and all. And so that was becoming a new trend. So, when I was a freshman, Gibbons was running an unbalanced line. That's why I was playing outside tackle as a freshman. And then as a sophomore, I think we went away from the unbalanced line to a more traditional formation. But then because football in general and coaches like Chuck wanted to keep up, they basically said, geez, I got a guy who can run the ball and pass the ball. Why don't we try this option stuff? So I think Chuck probably saw that he had somebody who could run that sort of offense, and he kind of adapted, to that. But I have to say, here's a question for you, football historian. In the NFL, back in that day, who called the plays?
Oh, it was the quarterback that called the plays.
That's correct. Who was the first team where the quarterback did not call the plays?
No idea.
Dallas Cowboys. Tom Landry used to shuttle guards in. Okay, and he would run the guards in a shuttle, 2 guards or 3 guards in a rotation, and he'd be sending plays in. So back then, football was, no matter whether you were a raw first-time quarterback playing your first year, they weren't signaling the plays and they weren't sending in the plays. You were calling them, right? So you had to be on the same page with that. So I remember before I was a junior, Chuck and I would be out in the evening in the back of the library there, on Meadow, not far from his house. and we'd be practicing, like what this option stuff would be like, right? So I hope there's no sanctions retroactively on this sort of stuff, but those were illegal practices at the time,
Right. But that was a different era and a different time. This is good stuff. You told me a story a few years ago about a premonition that you had, and you told Dick Winters about it as well too. Share that story with us.
All righty. Well, first I got to give you some background for the people who don't know who Dick Winters was. Dick Winters was the captain of police in Tonawanda at the time that he was coaching Gibbons. And Dick was an ex-Marine, and he was the line coach, and Chuck was the kind of like the backfield coach, the head coach and the backfield coach at Gibbons. And well, Marines have your reputation of being, kind of like stern and strict and by the rules and square off and, turn straight and all that sort of stuff. So we were doing some of those illegal practices during the summer, and he's an ex-Marine, right? So I could throw the ball hard, and I was stupid. Okay. I used to throw the ball hard, no matter whether I had to or not. Like if I could throw it soft to somebody and make sure they caught it, like I should have done that, but I was always trying to drill it, right? So we're doing these drills in this illegal summer practice, and they're doing these square ins. Remember when things were rigid? There weren't all these fancy routes like they have now. You're going to do a square in, and to a Marine, a square in meant a square in. You were going to go 10 yards down the field to that line, and you're going to square at a right angle, and you're going to cut across the middle. Right side, left side, right side, left side, next. And Dick's got his back to me, the quarterback, and he's standing there at about 7 yards from the line of scrimmage, and he's making sure that these people are squaring off those routes. And he's this Marine drill sergeant, right? And so one time I just was a little off target, as I was prone to be, but I'm drilling it, and I drilled Dick right in the back of the head with the pass. He's crouched there at 7 yards, and I just drilled him right straight in the back of the head, right? Dick just turns around and says, "Next." So that's the sort of toughness that you learn, So when you got injured or things like that, there was still a culture back in those days. You got your bell rung a little bit, who the heck was thinking about concussions, right? Get back in there, rub some dirt on it, run it off, right? So anyways, so Dick was a tough guy. Yeah, so we're coming up to the last game in Gibbons history. Now, we had shut out our last four opponents. We're coming to the last game, and we had a real running team. It was more of a running team, and for that matter, an outside running team. Now, I was reasonably fast, wasn't the fastest guy in the world, but we had a guy who was the state Catholic sprint champion, a guy named Ed Tylick, who passed away, I'm going to say maybe 10 years ago. May he rest in peace, but he was just lightning. He ran a 9.9 100-yard dash, which is kind of like a 10.8 something 100 meters. Not bad. Okay, so we used to run option outside, sweeps outside. I'd be running outside, he'd be running outside. We had some other fast guys. So turns out we had a bye before the last game, and the week before that, Chuck calls me and says, "You want to go scout out St. Francis of Athol Springs, who we're going to play in our last game? We're going to play down in Batavia at Notre Dame." And I go, "Sure, let's go." So we go out and we're scouting them. Now, Chuck's got the papers out there, and he's writing the stuff like a coach. I mean, I'm like mindless. I'm just watching the freaking game, and I'm just noticing what's going on. And I said, "Man, these guys are weak around the corners. They are weak on the edges. They're defensive ends and their corners. I mean, we're just going to be running rampant on them outside." Right. So I got my plan made. So I'm saying, all right, I'm saying to myself, right, I'm going to score the first time we touch the ball. The only teams I weren't on was the kickoff and the kickoff receiving team. So we win the toss, we get the kickoff, they run it back to about the 45-yard line, and I come in, we're on the right hash, and I say, "Okay, such and such a formation, option left." And everybody's going to break on two and break in the huddle. I says, "Hey, wait, everybody, and no penalties. Okay, so this sets the scene, right? So before the game, however, we're doing calisthenics and Dick Winters, because we had a couple of good years together, 3 good years together, and he comes up to me and says, Tony, you've had a great career. Have a great last game. It's been a pleasure coaching. And I say, thanks, coach. It really means a lot. I says, hey, but wait a second. I just want to tell you something. I'm going to score the first time I touch the ball tonight. And he goes, what? And I says, yeah, I'm going to score the first time I touch the ball. I says, and remember, I said that. So my plan is to run this option left. I'm not even going to think of pitching it. I'm just going to take it, get the corner, get the edge on a defensive end, beat the corner, go down the sideline and score, right? Because I seen him play the previous week. So what happens is somehow these guys scouted us at some point in time and they knew our tendencies too. So what happens, we run this option left and I go out there and they have their defensive end crash and I can't get the edge on them. Otherwise I'd have to circle backwards and now I'm losing it and all that. So I decide what you're supposed to do on the option play. The defensive end crashes, you cut up the middle. I break a couple arm tackles, go right up the middle and score. So apparently Dick goes up to Chuck after this play and he goes, do you realize what he told me just before the game? Now it happened totally different than I had planned. Now, but I hope you're up for funny stories, okay? Because it was a funny thing. Dave Bielski, you might know Dave. I don't know if you know him or not, all right? But he was a good friend of mine, went to school, OLC school, and Gibbons with him 13 years. And he was a big guy. He was a lineman. He was a guard. But we used to go out back of the junior high on Vetter Field there and kick field goals and throw passes and all that. And he could do it all. He could catch, he could throw, he could punt, he could kick and all that. And he was a guard, right? So Dave was the holder on extra points because he had the skill, right? And so they snap it to him and it's a bad snap and Dave can't get it down. So Dave rolls out and passes a 2-point conversion pass to John Tylak in the corner of the end zone. That's how we start this game. So it just says that back then there weren't formulas. You could have a big guy who had all sorts of skill, and it turns out we actually used it in strange ways. So that's a funny. That was the end of the Gibbons football history right there. So.
How many different offers did you have to play Division I football besides Boston College?
Oh, well, I could have gone to like Northwestern. I had a couple Ivy League schools, Cornell and Columbia. Maryland was a possibility, although that never panned out. But so 4 or 5. So BC was probably. I went to visit there, and I liked Boston, and they played the highest level of football in the East, other than Syracuse at the time, and we played Syracuse at BC. So that's why I went.
Were you recruited as a quarterback, or and if so, I know they switched positions on you.
Well, I moved away from linebacker at Gibbons for most of my junior year, a couple games into my junior year and my senior year, and I played corner because I was getting too beat up at linebacker to play quarterback. Okay, you get your hands smashed and all that sort of stuff. So they moved me over to corner. As it turns out, my first love in football was defense, and quarterback comes with a lot of I don't know. You can be you're considered a star and all that sort of stuff, but there's a lot of pressure that comes with being a quarterback too. And I liked it, and I could throw the ball, but I wasn't the most schooled quarterback. Okay, like I only played for a couple of years, and I wasn't like 4 or 5 years of little league football playing quarterback and all that. But I loved defense. So it was more, I was probably recruited to be, a defensive back, there. So as it turns out, me and a roommate of mine, a good friend of mine, we started as sophomores. You couldn't play as freshmen, and you have no business playing Division I as a freshman anyways. You're all coming in. So, but as sophomores, we were going to start the first game. It was going to be against Tulane. And so we replaced some veterans from the previous year. So it was kind of a changing of the guard there. And they thought, the Boston Globe thought that this would be an interesting story. So they had a pup reporter, a guy just starting out. The guy's name was Peter Gammons, right?
Yeah.
And so Peter Gammons is actually coming in and interviewing me and my buddy called John Peterson. And so Gammons is interviewing me, and he says, so you come from, a small town in New York called North Tonawanda, and you're going to be playing in front of 32,000 people on Friday night. How are you going to react to that? And my response to him was, Peter, when I was in high school, we were probably lucky to get 300 people at the game. So I learned a long time ago to play football, and I wasn't playing for the crowd. I was playing for the game. So it ain't going to make any difference to me. And that was my response.
Sure. Did he buy your response? Was he buying that response?
Oh yeah, it was written up.
All right.
It was in the Boston Globe. So I'll just give you 2 more short anecdotes because we're running way over time over here. And so we're playing Penn State as a sophomore. I'm a sophomore, and they got a running back named John Cappelletti. Okay. So I'm playing left corner, and John is, taking a sweep, along the right sideline, and he's just pinned on the sideline, and he's got no cutback angle and everything, and I'm right over there. And man, when you get a shot at somebody like that, you weren't going to take it. You're just going to cream the guy, right? So I'm running up, and I take him out. Well, he was a tough son of a bitch, okay? So I thought I'd knock him into the frickin' bench, and I knocked him about a yard out of bounds, okay, is what I ended up doing, all right? But one of their coaches, all right, thought, well, that was pretty gutsy of you to try that, because I know this guy, Cappelletti, and, he's a tough bastard, So the guy pats me on the ass, as, passing by him and all that. Turns out it's this guy named Sandusky. One of my teammates says he winked at me too.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Lucky you. Not really, but oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah, Joe Paterno was a coaching legend, at the time. Now the other last thing here is I didn't have a big storied career, at Boston College, but I was decent player, middle of the road sort of, team guy. And but I've never checked it, but I may have the record for the all-time punt return average in NCAA history, okay? Because I returned 1 punt, which was kind of accidental. It went more towards the sideline, and I was setting up to block, and I caught the punt, and I was already behind the wall and just got past a couple of guys and scored a 64-yard punt return touchdown. It was the only punt I ever returned. So it's a good chance I could have the all-time leading punt return average in the NCAA.
Oh, and that is definitely BC record. There's no doubt about that. You should be in the record book for that.
Career average, not total yardage and all.
All right, fair enough. Question for you. If you were meeting somebody off the street for the first time, or maybe a business associate, and you got talking about high school football, what would you tell them about Bishop Gibbons football?
We were a tight, a tight-knit group. You knew everybody because, again, it was such a small team. We had 23 guys on the team in the last year and all. And we just were playing for the passion of the game, for a goal. It's like anything else. All right. But we were fortunate enough. And again, I've mentioned Chuck, and I can't thank him enough for giving me a chance and having the trust in me. But he also set a standard over there, which was, we were going to learn how to play. And he wasn't a yeller. He didn't yell a lot and all. He just, he had a plan. He had a calming influence, and it was just a heck of a lot of fun, to play for him. Okay, and again, I mentioned Dick, and Dick passed away very, very young. Dick was probably still in his 40s when he passed away and all that, and we all miss him dearly. But he was a great man. Okay, and I thank, and I never hesitate to thank the guys who were older than me, who let me join in both before Gibbons and at Gibbons, and it made me a welcome part of the team. And if I was to give anybody from any town, North Tonawanda or otherwise, if you're a kid and you want to excel at sports, try to find a way to play up. Now, last thing I'll say is Ed and Keith Pascucci and Keith Miranto to a great extent. I don't know who Bud Henry was, right? But Bud Henry was one of the organizers, the initial committee that organized the Hall of Fame, and they induct contributors to North Tonawanda football into the Hall of Fame. And I can't find more deserving candidates than you guys for what you're doing here. Putting those games on here and allowing people like us to speak and share the passion that we had for growing up in that town with that tradition, and to being able to live it. But if I were to give any young kid advice, if they're going into sports, try to play above your level, because my favorite game of all the games Gibbons, there's a lot of missing games from Gibbons, but that last game that had the called shot on it, that is one game. And at that point, you're at the end of your career, you're kind of at the top of the heap. But the game I enjoy most is when I was a sophomore, when we were playing a team called Notre Dame. And I was playing with my friends like Pazik and Jerry Whitehead and all that, because at that time I was striving to succeed. I hadn't made it yet. And you always remember those times. And that's just a lesson in life. Never try to be the smartest guy in the room. Okay, you're better off being the dumbest guy in the room in business. All right, because you're going to learn more that way. You get to stretch yourself. So my best memories are when I was stretching to be better. Right. And that's what I would advise any kid. Always try to be better. And the only way you're going to get better is to stretch yourself and play with better competition. So that's it.
Tony Sukiennik, thank you so much for joining us from your part of the world in New Hampshire. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of the winter. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Always a pleasure, my friend. See you soon.